Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to Conversations on Care, our Facebook talk show bringing together service providers, our clients, and caregivers to help families better understand and cope with aging parents with chronic care needs. My name is Julie Collada, and I'm the founder and the president of Open Arms Solutions, a senior care agency serving the Chicagoland area, specializing in inspired, holistic dementia care. It's our mission to help our families through this journey and to know that your loved one is living their best life possible. As a reminder, if you find this information and these dialogues helpful, please give us a like on our website and share this information so we can reach more people who need it. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to learn more about, we'd love for you to write them in the comments below. And we'll do everything we can to put them on one of our programs. With me today is Allison Becker, who is a music therapist for Heartland Hospice, and Heartland has gone through we were just talking about this, they're now branding with their new name, which is Pro Medical Hospice. Allison is a board certified music therapist, and we're thrilled to have you with us, Allison. As we've been talking about before we went live, my office was very excited about this topic. And a shout out to Jenny Hartman for your connection. You two work together and had conversations about what we're doing and what you're doing, and that's how we found you, and you're a guest with us today. So thank you, Jenny.
Yes, thank you, Jenny.
So our topic today is how music impacts memory. And there's a lot of different aspects to music and memory that we're going to discuss today. And one of the things that we do know is that it's very powerful. There's some examples of how powerful music is at reaching people in different places in their life, whether it's on hospice or they're in a different place in their memory journey. We've been discussing pre-going live how powerful the impact can be. So tell us a little bit, Allison, about what's your story? I always love to start these segments with asking people, what's your story? What inspired you to get into music therapy? What was your
Absolutely. And that's a common question I get all the time because when someone is meeting me through the hospice process, the question is always, what kind of job is this? How does this even exist? I originally started in music education. I was doing my undergraduate work to be a choral director for kids, K through 12 music. Through the process, I was thinking about things. I have a younger cousin she's autistic. She's about 18 now, and I have a good closeness with her, and she was going through a lot of therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. And I was thinking about how singing could maybe help with some of the speech things she was working through. And she has a lot of hand tactile things, and I play piano, and how could piano help with that? And so in my research of in how music can work with kids with autism, I Googled around and found music therapy, and I realized that was really what I wanted to do. So I took a little bit of a turn. I went to Illinois State to get my master's in music therapy. Through the process of doing my clinical rounds in a number of different settings, one of them was a palliative care session through the local hospital. And I had the honor of being with a person as he was passing, just a couple days from passing. And I was able to, later the family actually reached out to me and expressed their gratitude. And I realized that there was a really special role for music therapy at end of life. So I did my internship in hospice care, and that's where I've been working ever since. So it's been a couple hard right turns, but this is a really special role and a really special field to be in.
Thank you for sharing that. And it is so we get to meet incredibly wonderful, dedicated, inspired people who get into healthcare for different reasons.
Mhm.
Many people, like yourself and me, had a personal experience that kind of caused them to pivot or, make that change. And there's nothing like being in something that you're really inspired to do. So we're both very fortunate in that regard. And I did
Absolutely.
share with you that I think one of the more powerful experiences I had with my mom when she was in hospice was this beautiful cellist, and she was a music therapist, and but I didn't know anything about it at the time. All I knew was when the hospice social worker suggested this might be beneficial for my mom and my family. I really didn't understand how, because at that point my mom really wasn't communicative.
Mhm.
And I will never forget, and I shared this with you before, I will never forget how powerful. And unfortunately, my mom was in pain at that point, or she appeared to be in pain. And when the cellist started playing, she just completely relaxed, completely calmed down. It was the most serene moment for all of us. For my mom, clearly, even though she couldn't communicate, it was clear to see that it was, and it was for my family. So it can be very, very powerful.
Absolutely.
So talk about, Allison, there's so many things I want to talk about with you, but can you give us some examples of, how you use music therapy at Heartland?
Absolutely. So I like to say that my work kind of straddles between what our nurses and our aides and our doctors do, which is a lot of symptom management, making sure people aren't in pain, aren't feeling anxious or short of breath, as well as also providing the emotional social support, spiritual support that our social workers, our chaplains, and our bereavement team provide to the clients and the families. I use music to straddle all those areas. So when I'm coming in to see someone who has pain or shortness of breath, I'm using usually live music. I'm playing live in person and singing myself to try to kind of manipulate the pain experience and help someone with their breathing to regulate them, make them feel more comfortable in conjunction with medications, or and sometimes when we're not using medications, maybe someone has a preference against medications. Music can be a substitute to help with some of those same symptoms. And then, of course, using the music for emotional, social, spiritual wellness. So for my clients who are more alert and able to process and talk about what they're going through, we can use music to help work through some of those hard talks in a way that's not as vulnerable as actually talking. Using music to help kind of tie up loose ends within the family and helping get to more of a place of peace as we get closer to the end. And then helping people, especially as we get later in the process, there's a lot of isolation. You're not leaving the home. You're not seeing people in your community as much, helping provide connection to your faith community and connection to who you are and connection to your history all through the music. So the goals that I address are very broad and they very much depend on the individual. But that's the beauty of it, is that it's all going to be very different depending on who I'm seeing and what they need.
Wonderful. So can you give us some examples of some of the instruments that you use, of the music you use?
Yeah.
And can people request a type of instrument or specific music?
Yeah, absolutely. So all music therapists, whether you see them in a hospital setting, rehab settings, mental health, hospice, we all are trained on piano, guitar, and voice. Those are the bare minimum. You will see other music therapists who are also cellists or violinists, or I've known a trombonist. They're out there. But I primarily use my guitar just because it's most portable. Since I do a lot of traveling, it's easiest to use the guitar in person. And I will usually play and sing with the person. If I have someone who's more alert and maybe is wanting to be more actively involved in the music, I have a variety of instruments. A lot of them are very adaptive because in the hospice setting, naturally, there are a lot of physical declines. So I have something like this. This is a table castanet. And as opposed to the ones that you would need to use a whole hand, you just have to tap on the table. I have, for example, an adaptive mallet. It's easier to hold. And I might pair that with, this is an easy cushion. There's essentially only 5 notes on it. One of it's doubled.
Say the name of it again, please.
It's an easy cushion, like an easy percussion. It's effectively set up with a pentatonic scale. And basically what that means is there's no wrong notes. Someone can play with me while I play guitar or I'm singing,
Nice.
And they'll never hit a wrong note. And so
Nice.
there's a lot of different ways I can bring instruments in depending on where someone is in their physical strengths. Music therapists outside of the hospice setting will use a larger variety of instruments, right? If you're working with kids, you want a lot of shakers, you want a lot of tambourines, loud rattling things. But it all really depends on where the client's at, what their interests are, and what their strengths are. So for me, mostly you'll see me walking around with a guitar on my bag, but you may see me walking around with a couple other doodads as well.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful that you've modified instruments so people can participate with you. I'm sure that that's an amazing experience. So let's pivot. We've been talking about an end of life and music. The topic is about how music can affect memory, which is so powerful. Why is music therapy so effective in reaching people with dementia when often other therapies just aren't?
Yeah. And, a lot of us have seen those videos online of someone with dementia effectively kind of waking up with music. And the question is, how is that possible? Someone who doesn't remember their child very well or doesn't remember who they are or where they are, how can they know these songs? The simplest answer is that music is a whole brain experience. And what I mean by that is we know so much about the brain. We know we have multiple speech centers for both speaking and for understanding language. We know we have different motor centers. We have different centers for hearing and for vision and for movement and for our emotions and our memories, and everything's locked away in its little center. But there's no music center. Music accesses all those areas simultaneously. And so the beauty of it is that through the process of something like dementia or Alzheimer's, as those neural connections are changing and disintegrating, they're still all connected in some way to each other, and music is taking advantage of what connections are left. And so I will very commonly have someone who either doesn't talk, or when they talk, it maybe isn't making a lot of sense to me. But if I pull out a song from their childhood, they can sing every single word. And so that's really what music therapy is taking advantage of, regardless of where in the lifespan we're using it. It's just the idea that it's addressing the entire brain at the same time, as opposed to needing to focus on a specific section.
Yeah, it's just you and I were talking again before the show started about different videos that we've seen. Alive Inside is something that's shows the example where people are just not communicative, and you put earphones on, you put music on, and they really come alive. And are able to have that. It's really dialogue with people, interaction with people. It's remarkable. There is a viewer question.
Yeah.
How do you assimilate a person's cognitive and physical decline while still engaging their musical interests?
And that is such a good question. And that is really the crux of why music therapy is so effective in the hospice setting, because the idea is that over time we will see physical and cognitive decline. And so the best thing about music therapy, one of the best things about music therapy, is it's very adaptive. So it can either be very active, and if I have someone who is very alert and very cognitive and wants to be very involved, we can do dancing potentially. We can do songwriting together. We can do lyric analysis. We can do improvisation. We can do all kinds of really active, involved types of music interventions to bring about whatever goals we're looking at. as we start seeing declines and changes, we can start changing that. One of my simplest examples is when I meet someone, I might say, what kind of music do you like? Tell me about the music that you like. And they can tell me, I love Frank Sinatra. I love Dean Martin. I don't really like Elvis. I don't want anything new. And we can have them generate their own songs to use during a visit. Over time, we may move toward, would you rather hear it A, B, or C? And they can choose from a list that I provide. We may get to a point where it's just A or B, and that's all we can kind of cognitively process. And so we'll choose between A or B, and then we'll do one song selection, yes or no. And then at a certain point, I may have someone who's not able to tell me what they want. And so I'll just make an educated guess, and I'll watch them very closely to see if there are any nonverbal signs of whether they're liking it or disliking it. It's the same with the physical responses. We may start with something more active, and then over time we'll move more into passive music listening. And so like you were kind of talking about with your personal experience, even when I have someone who's, we're talking hours, we're talking days, and they're not very actively responsive, we know that hearing is one of those last senses to go. So we still use music even when they're not actively responsive as a passive therapy to provide comfort and that supportive presence and to help with symptom management all the way through the end.
And that is just a remarkable example of how music is just so fundamental to our lives, and how it can stay with us to the very end and make a very big difference. What other examples do you have of, what makes someone a good candidate for music therapy? Maybe let's talk about the broader picture here.
Yeah. And you know what? I've run into a lot of, there's a lot of different ideas from people I come talk to about what a person who would qualify for music therapy looks like. And it's not always super intuitive. For example, I will have a lot of people refer to me saying, oh, she's a professional musician. She played and sang her whole life, loves music. Music therapy would be a great fit for her. And I found through personal experience that can be 50-50. Sometimes it's great because we can kind of talk shop. We both are musicians. We're able to really engage with each other at the same level. Yeah. I had told you before the show about a patient I'd had previously who wasn't really interactive with the world. I had thought one of his arms he had no use of. And I pulled him up to a piano and I started playing, and he asked me what key we were in, and I told him we were in D. And he sits upright and uses both arms and starts playing piano in the key of D. And I said, there you go. And we were able to really connect because of the music. But I've also had clients who, because of how the music was involved in their lives before, and because the dementia has brought a certain amount of confusion and agitation, sometimes that can be detrimental. I had a gal who it brought back a lot of difficult memories to be engaged in live music with me, and she wasn't really understanding my role in visiting her, because it's weird for someone to come sing to you at bedside. That's just a strange experience. And we ended up determining that even though she was a wonderful musician and very musical, and she loved listening to her own recordings, that live music with me just wasn't helping her as much as it was worrying her. So not necessarily being a musician is needed. Most of my clients don't have music background in any way. I do sometimes hear, well, she can't really hear well, which probably shouldn't do music. And I actually, just this week, I did an initial visit with someone who is very hard of hearing. And the funny thing is that sometimes those speech sounds that don't carry through, it's not quite the same as the broad experience of music coming through. So again, it really depends on what the hearing loss looks like. We can definitely do music therapy with someone who has hearing loss, especially prior to the hospice stage. There are a lot of people who are hard of hearing or deaf who engage in music therapy. But for me, it really just depends on the individual person. Really, anyone who has a need area that music can help with would qualify for music therapy. So moving more away from, oh, she loves music, and more to well, does she have a lot of symptoms that music can help with? Does she need some help expressing things, and maybe a little extra socialization or a little emotional support? Those are the things that might say, okay, let's look at music therapy as an option, as opposed to worrying about how much they like music or performed music in the past.
That's helpful. You know, when you said, and I was thinking about when you said and qualifies for music therapy, with what you do at Heartland Hospice, I imagine that Medicare pays for those sessions.
Sort of.
Private insurance.
So generally our patients are all on Medicare, and Medicare reimburses hospice at a flat per day rate. Doesn't matter how many services or how few services we provide. And so that's kind of special that Heartland has chosen to go above and beyond and have on these additional therapies without gaining any extra reimbursement. It's because Heartland knows that the benefit is there and it's very needed.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And just so the audience knows, though, you know, in those scenarios, in the hospice scenario, you know, there's no out of pocket for families.
Yeah, none at all. I get that question a lot. I'm always telling my clients it's all taken care of, not a penny you need to worry about.
Sure, that's wonderful. So for people who are listening, is there some advice you can give people that are at home with a loved one, and want to know how they can, you know, use music therapy? What are some examples of what they can do with their loved one? If it's just the two of them, what can they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things that I tell families and even a lot of my coworkers to do. And I think one of the biggest things is to not be afraid to try something new. I think sometimes there's a fear of doing live music. All the time I hear, oh, I can't sing. Well, everyone can sing. Everyone can bust out a tune. If you've got a baby in your arms, you're singing a lullaby that no one cares about the quality of your voice. And so one of the first things I suggest is sing in person. Whenever it comes to you, sing in person. If you're the kind of person who makes up silly words to a melody while you're cooking in the kitchen, absolutely do that. I know all the time that I'm busting out songs with the names of, I put my dog's name in a lot of songs as I'm working around the house with her. Don't be afraid to try new music. Although a lot of the music I do, and a lot of times music of preference, would be what we call the courting years. Anytime from when a person was 15 to 25 is usually their preferred music. Don't be afraid to try newer music or even older music or something they might not have heard before, just to see what they think and how they respond. You might find that they really enjoy it, or they might have something interesting to say about it that can lead you further into an experience together.
Okay, that's a great advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, what I found I had an experience with my mother-in-law, who also had Alzheimer's, and we had caregivers that stayed with her, and what we found is that you know, there was on Comcast cable, there was, you know, the oldies. There were certain magical stations, and we find that a lot for our clients. And I know this is true for my mother-in-law, is that we were searching for something that she would respond to and enjoy. Mm-hmm. And then we found the oldies on Comcast, and you know, she just came alive. When my husband came over, they would dance together to the oldies. They would sing together to the oldies. It was really, I would even sing. I have the worst voice in the world, but I saw how she responded, and
yes,
she didn't seem to care about my voice. She was just happy to do it.
Exactly.
It really was remarkable. And I do remember too, something that was powerful, at least for me, was watching how she would tap her feet.
Yep. And a lot of what you can do too is focus on the small responses you see. A lot of times I know people are very focused on whether or not they can answer my questions or whether or not they're singing, but look for the small signs. Do you see their breathing change? Are you seeing them tap their finger? Are you seeing little body movements or just visibly relaxing? Those little signs tell you everything.
Sure. Absolutely. And the bigger signs, like a big smile on their face, is just incredibly meaningful. There's another, we've gone through and we're continuing to work on being expert at caring for different chronic diseases. Certainly dementia is one of them. Parkinson's is another. And we've gone through, and we're very proud of the fact that we've associated with an organization called the Struthers Parkinson's Care Network. They're part of the Parkinson's Center of Excellence and Parkinson's Foundation's Center of Excellence. And so I've gone through training. Some of my key managers have gone through the training. And what part of the training that we went through, there was a music therapist. And one of the real challenges that people have with Parkinson's are freezing and changes. And when dopamine in the brain controls a lot of different things, and part of that is movement. And people with Parkinson's start to lose the levels of dopamine in their brain. So that's one of the things that starts to happen when people start, it's called freezing.
Yeah.
And they gave examples in the training of how music and music therapy can be used to help people get, and the word is, it's not very technical, unfrozen, unstuck, and start to move.
Yeah.
I even think about that, it must be very frightening.
Yeah. I've actually, a little over a year ago, I attended a continuing education event with Dr. Elizabeth Stegemoller. She is a board certified music therapist. And she is also, I believe, a neurologist. She specializes, she's an assistant professor of kinesiology at Iowa State, and she focuses on Parkinson's. And so I did a whole full day training with her where she was talking specifically about, of course, music in the brain, but specifically regarding Parkinson's and freezing and helping maintain a steady gait and improving speech and all those things that Parkinson's slowly takes away, how to use music to try to hold on to them as long as possible and maintain those strengths. And even doing what I do and knowing what I know, that training and some of the video examples she was able to show us were absolutely remarkable. Absolutely remarkable.
Absolutely. Agreed. And another example of how powerful music can be in reaching people and improving their lives. So,
yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Thank you so much.
Of course.
For taking the time to join us. And thank you for what you do. I know I personally get so much joy out of music at this point, at every point in my life. I think many of us do. Music takes you back.
It does.
It does. Takes you back to time and those significant events in your life. And it's powerful. And the therapies that you provide are very, very, very powerful, very meaningful. So thank you so much.
Of course. And thank you for having me here today. I'm really glad I was able to share some of my knowledge with you and experience with you. And I hope this was really helpful.
I have a strong feeling of people that have gotten a lot out of this. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Of course.